The air on Kalos 7 was thick with tension, the kind that made every breath feel heavy. The planet's dense jungles teemed with life, but today they were silent, unnaturally so. It wasn't the calm before a storm. It was the stillness of anticipation, like the universe itself was holding its breath. Somewhere deep in those shadowy woods, the last of the Vryn waited, unaware that their fate would soon be decided by humans. Dr. Illyra Voss adjusted her wristband recorder as she crouched behind a cluster of jagged rocks. Her heart pounded louder than she cared to admit. She had spent years studying the Vryn from afar, poring over ancient texts and fragmented data about these legendary creatures. They were apex predators, massive dragon-like beings with shimmering scales that reflected sunlight like liquid gold. Their wings stretched wide enough to block out the sky, and their roars could shake mountains. But now, after centuries of relentless hunting, only a handful remained. Illyra wasn't here for sport. Unlike the other hunters gathering nearby, she didn't carry weapons or wear armor plated with trophies from past kills. Instead, she carried a small drone tucked into her backpack, its lens gleaming faintly in the dim light. She was here to document, to bear witness to what might very well be the end of an entire species. Around her, the hunters laughed and boasted, their voices echoing through the clearing. Some wore sleek exosuits equipped with plasma rifles, while others carried traditional blades engraved with symbols of conquest. They came from all corners of the galaxy, united by one goal: to claim the ultimate prize, the head of a Vryn. For them, this wasn't just a hunt. It was a statement. Killing a Vryn meant proving dominance over nature itself. Illyra clenched her fists. How could anyone see these majestic creatures as mere trophies? To her, the Vryn weren't monsters. They were survivors. They deserved respect, not extermination. But arguing with hunters was pointless. So instead, she stayed hidden, recording everything. Suddenly, a sharp whistle cut through the air. The leader of the group, a grizzled man named Dax Torin, raised his hand, signaling the start of the hunt. His voice boomed as he addressed the crowd. "Remember the rules," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "No mercy, no retreat, and no survivors." The hunters cheered, their excitement palpable. Illyra's stomach churned. She knew what was coming next. The chase would begin, and the jungle would turn into a battlefield. As the group dispersed, she activated her drone, sending it soaring above the treetops to capture footage of the carnage below. Hours passed, and the jungle erupted in chaos. Gunfire echoed, followed by the guttural roar of a Vryn. Illyra froze, her eyes glued to the drone's live feed. Through the camera, she saw it. A juvenile Vryn cornered against a cliffside, its golden scales dulled with dirt and blood. Hunters surrounded it, laughing as they took aim. Without thinking, Illyra pressed record, capturing every horrifying detail. The Vryn fought back fiercely, swiping at its attackers with razor-sharp claws. But it was outnumbered. One by one, the hunters fired until the creature collapsed, its body trembling as life drained away. Illyra felt tears sting her eyes, but she forced herself to keep watching. Then, something unexpected happened. As the Vryn took its final breath, a strange sound filled the air. Not a roar, but a low hum, almost musical. The hunters paused, confused. Illyra's drone picked up the noise too. It vibrated through the ground, resonating deep within her chest. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. But the silence that followed was even worse, because in that moment, Illyra realized something chilling. The Vryn hadn't just died. It had cried out for help. And someone, or something, might have heard it. Kale didn't waste time. The roar had barely faded when he grabbed Illyra's arm and pulled her deeper into the shadows of the jungle. "Move," he hissed, his voice low but urgent. "If that thing finds us, we're dead." Illyra stumbled after him, clutching her tablet tightly against her chest. Her mind raced with questions. Who was this man? What did he know about the Vryn? And why did he seem so familiar with their behavior? But there was no time for answers now. The ground trembled beneath their feet as another roar split the air, closer this time. They darted between towering trees, their branches twisting together like skeletal fingers above them. Kale moved with practiced ease, weaving through the dense foliage without making a sound. Elira struggled to keep up, her boots slipping on damp leaves and loose rocks. Every snap of a twig felt deafening in the oppressive silence. "Where are we going?" she whispered, gasping for breath. "Away from whatever's chasing us," Kale replied over his shoulder. His tone left no room for argument. Vryn don't usually hunt at night unless they're provoked. Something spooked it. Elira's stomach sank. She knew exactly what, or rather, who, had provoked it. The hunter's attack earlier must have drawn the attention of other Vryn, and now they were retaliating. Guilt gnawed at her. Had her presence made things worse? Was she indirectly responsible for whatever was happening? After several minutes of running, Kale finally slowed down near a cluster of boulders half buried in moss. He motioned for Elira to stay quiet and crouched low, peering into the darkness behind them. The forest seemed eerily still, but both of them could feel it. The weight of being watched. "You're not one of them," Kale said suddenly, breaking the silence. His piercing gaze locked onto hers. "You're not here to kill." Elira shook her head, lowering her voice. "No, I'm not. I'm a xenobiologist. I came here to study the Vryn, not hurt them." Kale raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Study them? Out here alone, with no backup? I didn't expect this," she admitted, gesturing vaguely at the jungle around them. "I thought I'd find evidence of their intelligence, maybe prove they're more than just animals. But now," her voice trailed off as she glanced at her tablet, still glowing faintly with images of the dying Vryn's memories. "Now I'm starting to think I underestimated everything." Kale studied her for a moment longer before nodding slowly. "All right. I believe you, for now. But if you want to survive out here, you'll need my help." "Why would you help me?" Elira asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. "What's your story?" Kale sighed, leaning back against one of the boulders. For the first time, some of the hardness in his expression softened. "I used to be one of them," he said quietly. "A hunter. I helped lead expeditions against the Vryn years ago. Made a fortune selling their scales and bones. But then..." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Then I saw something I couldn't unsee. A mother Vryn protecting her young, even as hunters tore her apart. She looked at me like I was the monster." Elira listened intently, her heart aching at his words. "What happened after that?" "I walked away," Kale said simply. "Left everything behind. Been living out here ever since, trying to make sense of what I did. Not easy earning forgiveness, for myself or from the Vryn." Before Elira could respond, a sudden rush of wind sent leaves swirling around them. Both froze, their eyes scanning the skies. Above the treetops, a massive shadow circled. A Vryn, its golden scales shimmering under the moonlight. It let out a low growl, the sound reverberating through the jungle. "It knows we're here," Kale muttered, gripping a jagged piece of rock like a makeshift weapon. "We've got two choices, run or face it." Elira hesitated, her grip tightening on her tablet. Running wouldn't solve anything. If she wanted to understand the Vryn and protect them, she needed to take a stand. "Let's stay," she said firmly, surprising even herself. "But we do it together." Kale smirked, though there was no humor in it. "Brave or stupid, huh? Guess we'll find out." The Vryn circled above them, its massive wings casting fleeting shadows over the forest floor. Each beat of its wings sent gusts of wind rustling through the trees, making the jungle feel alive with tension. Elira's heart pounded as she stared up at the creature, her mind racing. She had spent years studying these beings from afar, but now, face to face with one, she felt both awe and terror in equal measure. Kale stood beside her, gripping the jagged rock like a weapon. His stance was tense, ready for anything, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of hesitation. He wasn't afraid. He was conflicted. "Stay calm," he whispered without looking at her. "Don't make any sudden moves." Elira nodded, though her hands trembled. She clutched her tablet tightly, the device still glowing faintly with the fragmented memories of the dying Vryn. For a moment, she wondered if showing the creature this evidence might help. It could prove that not all humans were enemies. But how would it react? Would it see her as a threat or an ally? The Vryn let out another low growl, its golden eyes locking onto them. It landed heavily on a nearby boulder, its claws digging into the stone. The ground shook slightly under its weight. Its gaze shifted between Kale and Elira, as though trying to assess their intentions. Then, unexpectedly, it tilted its head, almost curiously. Elira took a cautious step forward, ignoring Kale's sharp intake of breath. "It's okay," she murmured softly, more to herself than to the creature. "I'm not here to hurt you." Kale grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "You can't just walk up to it." "I have to try," Elira replied, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. She glanced down at her tablet, then back at the Vryn. Slowly, deliberately, she held the device up so the creature could see the images displayed on the screen, the memories of its fallen kin. For a long moment, nothing happened. The Vryn simply stared, its massive chest rising and falling with each labored breath. Then, something changed. A soft hum filled the air, similar to the one Elira had recorded earlier. It resonated deep within her chest, vibrating like a melody only she could hear. The Vryn lowered its head slightly, its golden eyes narrowing as though focusing on the tablet. "It understands." Elira breathed, her voice barely audible. "It knows what I'm showing it." Kale released her arm, watching in stunned silence. This isn't possible," he muttered. "Vryn aren't supposed to." "Maybe we've been wrong about them all along," Elira interrupted, her tone firm. "They're not just animals. They're intelligent, sentient, and they're trying to tell us something." The hum grew louder, accompanied by flashes of light that seemed to emanate from the Vryn itself. Images began to form in Elira's mind, not her own thoughts, but fragments of the creature's memories. She saw vast landscapes untouched by humans, skies filled with stars, and towering crystal structures that pulsed with energy. But there was also pain, images of fire, destruction, and death. Humans wielding weapons, Vryn falling, blood staining the earth. Tears welled up in Elira's eyes as the full weight of what she was witnessing hit her. These weren't random visions. They were messages, warnings. The Vryn were telling her their story, their suffering at the hands of humanity. When the hum finally faded, the Vryn lifted its head and let out a mournful roar that echoed through the jungle. It was a sound of grief, anger, and defiance all rolled into one. Elira felt it in her bones, a call to action. Kale stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "What did it show you?" he asked quietly. "Everything," Elira replied, her voice shaking. "Their history, their pain, what we've done to them. If we don't do something, they'll be gone forever." The Vryn spread its wings, preparing to take flight. Before it launched itself into the air, it turned its gaze back to Elira one last time. There was no hostility in its eyes, only a plea, a desperate hope that someone, somewhere, would listen. As the creature disappeared into the night sky, Kale exhaled sharply. "All right," he said, his tone resolute. "If you're serious about saving them, I'm in. But this isn't going to be easy." Elira nodded, clutching her tablet tightly. "I know, but we have to try." Together, they stood beneath the stars, the echoes of extinction ringing in their ears. The jungle seemed quieter after the Vryn's departure, as though even the insects feared disturbing the fragile balance of power that had shifted in its wake. Elira and Kale stood side by side, their breaths visible in the cool night air. The weight of what they had witnessed, and the responsibility it carried pressed down on them like an invisible force. "We need to find the others," Elira said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady but tinged with urgency. "If we can show them what I saw, maybe we can stop this before it's too late." Hale frowned, his brow furrowed in thought. "You mean convince a pack of bloodthirsty hunters to suddenly grow consciences? Good luck with that." "I'm not talking about the hunters," Elira shot back, her tone sharp. "I'm talking about the other Vryn. If we can reach them, if we can prove we're not here to harm them, we might have a chance to protect them." Cale let out a low whistle, shaking his head. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. But getting close to a full-grown alpha Vryn is suicide. Even if they don't kill you outright, they'll see you as a threat just for being human." Elira didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stared into the darkness where the massive creature had vanished moments earlier. She knew Kel was right. Approaching the Vryn would be dangerous. But she also knew that doing nothing would guarantee their extinction. "We don't have a choice," she said firmly. "If we don't try, no one else will." Cale hesitated, then sighed. "Fine, but if we're doing this, we do it my way. You follow my lead, no questions asked." Elira nodded, grateful for his willingness to help despite the risks. Together, they set off deeper into the jungle, guided by the faint glow of bioluminescent plants and the occasional distant roar of a Vryn. The forest felt alive around them. Every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs amplified in the tense stillness. Hours passed before they reached the edge of a vast clearing bathed in moonlight. At its center loomed a towering rock formation, jagged and ancient, surrounded by smaller boulders that looked almost deliberately placed. This was it, the lair of the last surviving alpha Vryn. As they approached cautiously, a deep rumble echoed through the air, vibrating beneath their feet. From the shadows emerged the creature itself, a colossal being far larger than any Vryn Elira had seen before. Its golden scales shimmered with an otherworldly glow, and its eyes burned with intelligence and fury. This was Jarak, the leader of the remaining Vryn. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Jarak's gaze locked onto them, assessing, calculating. Then, without warning, it let out a deafening roar that sent birds scattering from the treetops. Elira flinched but forced herself to stand her ground. Cale stepped forward slightly, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "We're not here to fight," he called out, his voice calm but firm. "We came to help." Jarak tilted its massive head, clearly skeptical. It lowered itself closer to the ground, its tail flicking impatiently. Another hum filled the air, softer this time, but unmistakably directed at them. Elira took a tentative step forward, holding up her tablet once again. "I know what's happening to your kind," she said softly, her voice trembling but determined. "And I want to make it stop." Jarak's eyes narrowed, focusing on the device. Images began to flash across Elira's mind. Visions of destruction, survival, and resilience. The Alpha wasn't just listening, it was communicating. Through fragmented memories and emotions, it shared its pain and its plea for justice. When the connection broke, Jarak let out another low growl, this one tinged with something akin to hope. It regarded Elira and Cale silently for a long moment before turning away, gesturing toward the jungle with a sweep of its wing. "Is it letting us follow?" Elira whispered, unsure. Cale nodded grimly. "Looks like it. But trust me, this isn't over yet." Together, they followed the Alpha into the heart of the jungle, knowing that whatever awaited them next would test their courage and humanity to its limits. The jungle grew darker as Jarak led Elira and Cale deeper into its territory. The massive Vryn moved with an eerie grace, its golden scales glinting faintly in the dim moonlight filtering through the dense canopy. Every step it took seemed deliberate, as though it was guiding them toward something important, or perhaps preparing them for a final judgment. Elira struggled to keep up, her boots sinking into the soft earth with every stride. She clutched her tablet tightly, the device still glowing faintly with the fragmented memories Chirac had shared. Each image burned brighter in her mind than before. The devastation wrought by human greed, the cries of fallen Vryn, and the desperate hope that somehow their species could endure. It wasn't just a plea. It was a call to action. Kale walked ahead of her, his posture tense but alert. He kept one hand on the jagged rock he carried like a makeshift weapon, ready for anything. Despite his outward calm, Illyra noticed the way his jaw clenched whenever Chirac glanced back at them. He didn't trust the Alpha, not fully, but he trusted Illyra enough to follow her lead. After what felt like hours, they reached a hidden clearing surrounded by towering trees whose roots twisted together like ancient walls. In the center stood a small group of Vryn, some injured, others visibly weakened. Their golden scales were dulled with dirt and blood, and their eyes reflected both exhaustion and defiance. These were the last survivors. Chirac let out a low growl, drawing the attention of the others. One by one, they turned to face Illyra and Kale, their gazes sharp and unyielding. For a moment, no one moved. The air was heavy with tension, thick enough to choke on. Illyra stepped forward hesitantly, raising her hands in a gesture of peace. "We're not here to hurt you," she said softly, her voice trembling but clear. "I know what's been done to your kind. I've seen it." She held up her tablet, showing them the images of destruction and loss. "And I want to help." The Vryn exchanged wary glances, their expressions unreadable. Some snarled quietly, distrustful of her presence, while others tilted their heads curiously, as if trying to understand her intentions. Chirac lowered itself closer to the ground, letting out another hum that resonated through the clearing. This time, the sound carried a sense of reassurance, urging its kin to listen. Kale leaned toward Illyra, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're not convinced yet. If we don't prove ourselves soon, they'll turn on us." Illyra nodded, her heart racing. She knew this was their only chance. Taking a deep breath, she knelt down and placed the tablet on the ground, leaving it within reach of the nearest Vryn. "Take it," she urged gently. "See for yourselves." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, one of the smaller Vryn approached the device, sniffing cautiously before nudging it with its snout. Images flickered across its mind. The same memories Illyra had witnessed earlier, and its golden eyes widened in recognition. It let out a soft chirp, turning to share the discovery with the others. Chirac watched silently, its massive form radiating authority. When the other Vryn began to gather around the tablet, murmuring in low tones, the Alpha turned its piercing gaze back to Illyra and Kale. "You've earned their attention," Kale muttered under his breath. "But earning their trust is another story." Illyra met Chirac's eyes, her resolve unwavering. "Tell me what to do," she said aloud, addressing the Alpha directly. "How can we help?" Chirac let out a deep rumble, almost like a sigh. Its tail swept across the ground, pointing toward the edge of the clearing where faint lights flickered in the distance. Hunters. They were closing in. "They're coming," Kale said grimly, gripping his rock tighter. "If we're going to protect them, we need to act now." Illyra nodded, determination hardening her features. Together, she and Kale formulated a plan, one that would require courage, cunning, and an alliance unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. As Chirac roared in agreement, the stage was set for a battle that could change everything, for humans and Vryn alike. The first crack of gunfire shattered the stillness of the jungle, echoing through the clearing like a thunderclap. The hunters had found them. Illyra's heart leaped into her throat as she ducked behind a twisted root, her hands trembling. The faint glow of weapon lights pierced the darkness at the edge of the clearing, growing brighter with each passing second. She could hear shouts, angry voices barking orders, their tone laced with excitement and malice. They were closing in fast. Chirac let out a deafening roar, its massive wings spreading wide, as it positioned itself between the approaching hunters and its kin. The other Vryn followed suit, their golden eyes gleaming with defiance despite their injuries. This was their home, their sanctuary, and they weren't going down without a fight. Kale crouched beside Elira, his face grim but focused. "Stay close," he whispered urgently. "If things go south, head for the trees. You'll have a better chance of losing them there." Elira shook her head, clutching her tablet tightly. "I'm not leaving," she said firmly. "Not now. Not after everything we've done to get here." Kale shot her a sharp look but didn't argue. Instead, he handed her a jagged piece of rock, similar to his own makeshift weapon. "Then stay alive," he growled before darting toward the edge of the clearing. The battle erupted moments later. Hunters surged forward, their plasma rifles blazing. Bright bolts of energy seared through the air, striking trees and sending bark splintering in all directions. The Vryn countered with ferocity, unleashing torrents of fire from their gaping maws. Flames licked the night sky, illuminating the chaos below. Roars and screams filled the air as hunter clashed with predator. Elira scrambled to find cover, her mind racing. Her role wasn't to fight. It was to protect the evidence. If she could sabotage the hunters' equipment or disable their weapons, she might give the Vryn a fighting chance. Spotting a cluster of drones hovering near the hunters' rear lines, she made her move. Dodging blasts of energy and diving behind fallen logs, Elira reached the drones just as one of them turned its camera lens toward her. Thinking quickly, she activated her tablet and uploaded a virus she'd been developing back on her ship, a program designed to disrupt communication systems. Within seconds, the drone sputtered and fell silent, followed by another, then another. The hunter's advantage began to wane. Meanwhile, Kale fought alongside the Vryn, using his knowledge of hunting tactics against their attackers. He hurled rocks and debris at unsuspecting hunters, knocking them off balance long enough for the Vryn to strike. Each blow landed with precision, fueled by years of guilt and regret. This was his redemption, and he wasn't about to waste it. At the center of the fray stood Jirek, a force of nature incarnate. Its claws tore through armor, its fiery breath reduced weapons to molten slag. But even an alpha couldn't hold out forever. A barrage of plasma bolts struck its side, forcing it to stumble back. Blood trickled from its wounds, staining the earth beneath its massive form. Elira saw this and froze, her chest tightening. Without thinking, she sprinted toward the alpha, shouting, "No, don't give up." Kale grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "You can't save everyone," he yelled over the din. "Focus on what matters." But Jirek wasn't done yet. With a final, ear-splitting roar, it summoned every ounce of strength left in its body. Its wings flared wide, creating a shockwave that sent hunters flying backward. Then, with a burst of speed no one thought possible, it charged straight into the hunter's flagship, a hovering gunship equipped with devastating firepower. Time seemed to slow as the Alpha collided with the vessel. An explosion rocked the jungle, lighting up the night sky in a blaze of fire and smoke. The ground shook violently, knocking both humans and Vryn off their feet. When the dust settled, silence fell over the clearing. The hunters were retreating, their forces decimated. The remaining Vryn gathered around the wreckage, their heads bowed in mourning. Elira stared at the burning remains, tears streaming down her face. Jirek was gone, but its sacrifice had ensured the survival of its kind. Kale placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice heavy with emotion. "It gave us a chance," he said softly. "Now it's up to us to make sure it wasn't in vain." The aftermath of the battle was a grim tableau. Smoke curled into the night sky, carrying with it the acrid scent of burnt metal and scorched earth. The wreckage of the hunter's flagship still smoldered at the edge of the clearing, its twisted remains a stark reminder of Jirek's final act of defiance. The surviving Vryn stood in solemn silence, their golden scales dulled by ash and blood. Some bore fresh wounds, while others limped weakly, leaning against one another for support. Elira knelt near the center of the clearing, her hands trembling as she clutched her tablet. Tears streaked her dirt-streaked face, but she forced herself to stay composed. She owed it to Jirac, to all of them. The Alpha had sacrificed everything to protect its kin, and now it was up to her and Kale to ensure that sacrifice wasn't wasted. Kale moved quietly among the injured Vryn, offering what little aid he could. He tore strips from his tattered jacket to bind open wounds, his movements careful yet efficient. Despite years of avoiding these creatures, he seemed instinctively attuned to their needs, earning cautious nods of gratitude from some of the weaker ones. "They're not going to trust us completely," Kale said finally, crouching beside Elira. His voice was low but steady. "Not after everything humans have done to them." "I know," Elira replied softly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "But maybe they don't have to trust us right away. Maybe they just need proof that we're willing to change." Kale gave her a sidelong glance, his expression unreadable. "You really believe that? That humanity can fix this?" Elira hesitated, her gaze drifting toward the remaining Vryn. Their eyes reflected pain, resilience, and a flicker of hope that perhaps not all humans were monsters. "We have to try," she said firmly. "If we don't, then Jirac died for nothing." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. After a long pause, Kale nodded slowly. "All right. So what's the plan?" Elira exhaled sharply, gathering her thoughts. "First, we document everything. The hunter's attack, Jirac's sacrifice, the memories I've recorded. We send it out to every galactic news outlet, expose the truth about the Vryn. Then we use that momentum to push for protections. A sanctuary, maybe even a ban on hunting them entirely." Kale raised an eyebrow. "You think people will listen? Most of them won't care unless it affects their credits or their egos." "Maybe not everyone," Elira admitted. "But there are good people out there. Scientists, activists, politicians who want to do the right thing. If enough voices speak up, we can make a difference." Before Kale could respond, one of the larger Vryn approached them cautiously. Its scales gleamed faintly in the moonlight, though scars marked its body like badges of survival. It lowered its head slightly, fixing Elira with an intense gaze. A soft hum filled the air, resonating deep within her chest. "It's thanking us," Elira whispered, her voice breaking slightly. She placed a hand over her heart, bowing her head in return. "For standing with them." Kale watched the exchange silently, his expression softening. For the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't dared to feel in a long time. Hope. As dawn broke over Kalos 7, painting the jungle in hues of gold and green, Elira and Kale began the painstaking process of cleaning up the battlefield. They salvaged what they could from the wreckage: weapons, supplies, anything that might help the Vryn heal. The creatures watched them warily, but allowed them to work, their distrust slowly giving way to guarded acceptance. By midday, the clearing had transformed. Where chaos and destruction once reigned, there was now a fragile sense of order. The surviving Vryn gathered around Elira and Kale, their golden eyes reflecting a mix of sorrow and determination. Together, human and creature stood united, not as enemies, but as allies. "We'll keep fighting," Elira murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "For them. For Jirac." Kale nodded, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Then let's get started." And so, under the watchful gaze of the Vryn, the seeds of a new future were planted. One built on understanding, respect, and the unyielding belief that even the deepest wounds could heal with time. Months passed, and the jungle of Kalos 7 began to heal. The scars left by the battle faded beneath layers of new growth, vines creeping over charred earth, flowers blooming in once barren patches, and birds returning to sing their morning songs. But for Elira and Kale, the work was far from over. Every day brought new challenges as they struggled to rebuild not just the Vryn's habitat, but also the fragile trust between humans and these majestic creatures. Elira had returned to her ship shortly after the battle, broadcasting Jirac's story and the truth about the Vryn to every corner of the galaxy. Her recordings spread like wildfire, sparking outrage among those who cared about justice and conservation. Protests erupted outside galactic councils, demanding stricter protections for endangered species. Scientists petitioned for funding to study the Vrin's sentience further, while activists called for bans on hunting practices that exploited wildlife. But change didn't come easily. Powerful corporations and wealthy elites pushed back, arguing that such measures would harm the economy or infringe on personal freedoms. Some dismissed Alira's findings as exaggerated or fabricated, refusing to believe that humanity could be so cruel, or that the Vrin were truly intelligent beings deserving of rights. Despite the resistance, progress was made. A coalition of scientists, politicians, and environmentalists formed the Galactic Wildlife Preservation Act, GWPA, a landmark initiative aimed at protecting endangered species across inhabited planets. Kalos 7 became one of its first sanctuaries, declared off-limits to hunters and poachers under strict penalties. Armed patrols now monitored the planet's borders, ensuring no unauthorized ships entered its atmosphere. Back on the ground, Alira worked tirelessly alongside the surviving Vrin. With Cal's help, she established a makeshift sanctuary near the clearing where Jirek had fallen, a place where injured Vrin could recover and where researchers could study them without intrusion. She spent hours each day observing their behavior, learning how they communicated through hums, gestures, and flashes of light. Slowly, she began to understand their language, not just as sounds, but as emotions, memories, and shared experiences. The Vrin, however, remained cautious. While some allowed Alira and Kale to approach, others kept their distance, wary of betrayal. It was clear that centuries of persecution had left deep wounds, ones that wouldn't heal overnight. But small signs of progress emerged. One young Vrin, smaller than the rest, started venturing closer to Alira, tilting its head curiously whenever she spoke. Another allowed her to treat an infected wound, its golden eyes softening with gratitude. Kale, too, found himself changing. Once hardened by guilt and regret, he now felt a renewed sense of purpose. He taught Alira survival skills, how to navigate the jungle safely, identify medicinal plants, and recognize signs of danger. In return, she reminded him why he'd turned away from hunting in the first place: the possibility of redemption. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Alira stood atop a hill overlooking the jungle. Beside her, Kale leaned against a tree, his arms crossed. Below them, several Vrin soared gracefully through the twilight sky, their wings catching the last rays of sunlight. "They're starting to trust us," Alira said softly, a hint of pride in her voice. "Some of them," Kale replied, his tone measured. "But it'll take time. Maybe generations." Alira nodded, her gaze fixed on the flying figures. "It's worth it. For Jirek. For all of them." As the stars began to twinkle above, Alira felt a quiet determination settle within her. The road ahead would be long and fraught with obstacles, but she knew they were moving in the right direction. Together, humans and Vrin were beginning to rewrite their shared history, one built on respect, understanding, and hope. And for the first time in years, Kale smiled. A genuine, unguarded smile. Perhaps, he thought, there really was a future worth fighting for. Years passed, and the planet Kalos 7 transformed into something no one could have imagined during those dark days of bloodshed. The jungle thrived as never before, its vibrant greens and shimmering blues a testament to nature's resilience and humanity's capacity for change. The Vrin population began to recover, their golden scales once again glinting beneath the sunlit canopies. They were no longer just survivors. They were guardians of their world, reclaiming what had been stolen from them. Alira returned often, her visits becoming less about research and more about connection. She had grown close to the Vrin, particularly to the young one that had first approached her years ago. Now fully grown, it was a magnificent creature with wings that spanned wider than any Alira had seen. It responded to her presence with gentle hums, its golden eyes reflecting trust, a bond forged through patience, respect, and shared understanding. The sanctuary she and Kale had built became a beacon of hope across the galaxy. Scientists, conservationists, and curious visitors came from distant planets to witness the harmony between humans and Vryn. The Galactic Wildlife Preservation Act, GWPA, expanded its reach, protecting not only the Vryn but countless other endangered species throughout the stars. Humanity's relationship with wildlife shifted, from exploitation to coexistence. Kale stayed on Kalos 7, choosing to live among the Vryn as both protector and mediator. He taught new arrivals how to interact respectfully with the creatures, sharing stories of Gyrek's sacrifice and the lessons he'd learned along the way. His gruff exterior softened over time, replaced by a quiet wisdom earned through hardship and redemption. To many, he became a symbol of what humanity could achieve when it chose compassion over greed. One crisp morning, Alara stood atop the same hill where she and Kel had watched the Vryn soar years earlier. The air was cool, carrying the scent of blooming flowers and damp earth. Below her, the jungle stretched endlessly, alive with the sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves. But today, something felt different. Her attention turned to the sky as a shadow passed overhead. A young Vryn, one born after the battle, was taking flight for the first time. Its wings flapped awkwardly at first, unsteady against the breeze, but soon it found its rhythm, gliding effortlessly above the treetops. Alara smiled, tears welling in her eyes. This moment wasn't just about survival. It was about renewal. Kale joined her on the hill, his weathered face breaking into a rare grin. "Looks like we did good," he said simply, his voice tinged with pride. Alara nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. "We couldn't have done it without them," she replied, gesturing toward the flying Vryn. "And without you." Kale chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Nah, you're the one who believed we could make a difference. I just tagged along for the ride." They stood in silence for a while, watching as the young Vryn soared higher, joining others in playful dives and loops. The sight filled them with hope, not just for the Vryn, but for all life in the galaxy. If humans and Vryn could overcome centuries of fear and hatred, then perhaps anything was possible. As the sun climbed higher, casting golden light over the jungle, Alara took a deep breath. She thought of Gyrek, whose sacrifice had sparked this new era. Though gone, its legacy lived on in every wingbeat, every hum, every flicker of trust between species. "Thank you," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was speaking to the Vryn, the planet, or herself. Kale placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch grounding her. "This is just the beginning," he said. "There's still so much work to do." Alara smiled, turning to look at him. "Then let's keep going." Together, they descended the hill, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Behind them, the jungle buzzed with life, a living reminder that even in the darkest times, a new dawn could rise, if people dared to believe in it. The aftermath of the battle was a grim tableau. Smoke curled into the night sky, carrying with it the acrid scent of burnt metal and scorched earth. The wreckage of the hunter's flagship still smoldered at the edge of the clearing, its twisted remains a stark reminder of Gyrek's final act of defiance. The surviving Vryn stood in solemn silence, their golden scales dulled by ash and blood. Some bore fresh wounds, while others limped weakly, leaning against one another for support. Alara knelt near the center of the clearing, her hands trembling as she clutched her tablet. Tears streaked her dirt-streaked face, but she forced herself to stay composed. She owed it to Gyrek, to all of them. The Alpha had sacrificed everything to protect its kin, and now it was up to her and Kale to ensure that sacrifice wasn't wasted. Kale moved quietly among the injured Vryn, offering what little aid he could. He tore strips from his tattered jacket to bind open wounds, his movements careful yet efficient. Despite years of avoiding these creatures, he seemed instinctively attuned to their needs, earning cautious nods of gratitude from some of the weaker ones. "They're not going to trust us completely," Kale said finally, crouching beside Elira. His voice was low but steady. Not after everything humans have done to them. I know. Elira replied softly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. But maybe they don't have to trust us right away. Maybe they just need proof that we're willing to change. Kale gave her a sidelong glance, his expression unreadable. You really believe that? That humanity can fix this? Elira hesitated, her gaze drifting toward the remaining Vryn. Their eyes reflected pain, resilience, and a flicker of hope. Hope that perhaps not all humans were monsters. We have to try, she said firmly. If we don't, then Jirek died for nothing. Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. After a long pause, Kale nodded slowly. All right. So what's the plan? Elira exhaled sharply, gathering her thoughts. First, we document everything. The hunter's attack, Jirek's sacrifice, the memories I've recorded. We send it out to every galactic news outlet, expose the truth about the Vryn. Then we use that momentum to push for protections, a sanctuary, maybe even a ban on hunting them entirely. Kale raised an eyebrow. You think people will listen? Most of them won't care unless it affects their credits or their egos. Maybe not everyone, Elira admitted, but there are good people out there, scientists, activists, politicians who want to do the right thing. If enough voices speak up, we can make a difference. Before Kale could respond, one of the larger Vryn approached them cautiously. Its scales gleamed faintly in the moonlight, though scars marked its body like badges of survival. It lowered its head slightly, fixing Elira with an intense gaze. A soft hum filled the air, resonating deep within her chest. It's thanking us, Elira whispered, her voice breaking slightly. She placed a hand over her heart, bowing her head in return. For standing with them. Kale watched the exchange silently, his expression softening. For the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't dared to feel in a long time. Hope. As dawn broke over Kalos 7, painting the jungle in hues of gold and green, Elira and Kale began the painstaking process of cleaning up the battlefield. They salvaged what they could from the wreckage. Weapons, supplies, anything that might help the Vryn heal. The creatures watched them warily, but allowed them to work, their distrust slowly giving way to guarded acceptance. By midday, the clearing had transformed. Where chaos and destruction once reigned, there was now a fragile sense of order. The surviving Vryn gathered around Elira and Kale, their golden eyes reflecting a mix of sorrow and determination. Together, human and creature stood united, not as enemies, but as allies. We'll keep fighting, Elira murmured, more to herself than anyone else. For them, for Jirek. Kale nodded, placing a hand on her shoulder. Then let's get started. And so, under the watchful gaze of the Vryn, the seeds of a new future were planted. One built on understanding, respect, and the unyielding belief that even the deepest wounds could heal with time.